Now you'll have to bear with me. This is a new computer, and I am an old man. The two don't always mix, so I've been having a little trouble with the screen, but we'll work through it together. As I said, Ben is the youngest man that we have out here speaking, and I am by far the oldest. But on balance, you'll hear the same message from both of us, as you'll hear the same message all over Ireland as we begin to talk about this. The theme of my talk tonight can be summed up in a quote from the Irish author, orator, philosopher, and political theorist Edmund Burke, who famously said, "The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing." I am hoping your presence here tonight says that you are no longer willing to do nothing. We are here tonight to discuss how we can return to the sovereignty, independence, and democracy that our forefathers fought, bled, and died to achieve. Before we can do that, however, there are some serious roadblocks we must overcome. One of the most nefarious is an Irish inferiority complex. Whenever we discuss this idea of breaking away from the EU and going out as an independent nation that we are, we always have somebody whining, but how can we govern ourselves? We're such a small nation. How can we compete on the global stage? Who would trade with us? If any of those are real issues, how do you explain Hong Kong? How do you explain Singapore? How do you explain New Zealand? How do you explain Iceland? Iceland, for God's sakes, with a population that is a mere percentage of what we have in Ireland, has more trading partners than all of the EU combined. Now, how do you explain that? We can do this. And we can become that same sort of success story. Let me tell you a story from your own history. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the story of the 9 famous Irishmen. The young Irish disorders, which incidentally introduced the tricolour to the island, involved a shootout between a group of rebels and the Irish constabulary in a village in South Tipperary, 1848. The following 9 men were captured, tried, and convicted of treason against Her Majesty the Queen and were sentenced to death. John Mitchell, Maurice Leon, Pat Donahue, Thomas McGee, Charlie Duffy, Thomas Maher, Richard O'Garman, Terence McManus, and Michael Ireland. Before passing sentence, the judge asked if anyone wanted to say anything. Maher, speaking for the entire group, said, "My lord, this is our first offense, but I promise you it won't be our last. If you go easy on us this one time, I give you our word as gentlemen that we'll do better the next time, and the next time we won't be fools enough to get caught." Well, thereupon the indignant judge sentenced them all to be hung by the neck and then drawn and quartered. Passionate protests erupted all over the world, and it forced Queen Victoria to commute their sentences to transportation for life to far wild Australia. In 1874, word reached the astonished Queen Victoria that Sir Charles Duffy, that had just been elected Prime Minister of Australia, was the same Charles Duffy that she had sentenced to be sent abroad for life. She was so astounded, that she required the rest of their records to be unsealed. And this is what she discovered. Pardon me. In addition to the aforementioned Sir Charles Duffy, Thomas Francis Maher was the governor of Montana. Terence McManus was a brigadier general in the United States Army. Patrick O'Donoghue was a brigadier general in the United States Army. Maurice Leon was the Attorney General of Australia, in which position Michael Ireland had succeeded him. Thomas McGee was a member of the Parliament in Montreal, Minister of Agriculture, and President of the Council of the Dominion of Canada. John Mitchell was a prominent New York politician. He was the father of John Purroy Mitchell, who was the mayor of New York at the outbreak of World War I. This is the story of the Irish, and when they're given a chance to make their own futures and not be held back by their government or other governments. They not only survived, but thrived and even excelled, and that story's been repeated millions of times in various forms all over the globe. I dare say America, Australia, Canada, New Zealand would not be the dynamic nations they are today had it not been for the infusion of the Irish. We Irish have survived and thrived despite everything that has been thrown at us, from British occupation for 8 centuries, to famine, to revolution, and now the domination by the bullies in Brussels. And their puppets in the Irish government who have combined and are attempting to turn our republic and our national culture, customs, and traditions into a Marxist cesspool. We need to understand, and this is critical, that in a much larger sense, this is not just about Ireland. Ireland is merely the Western Front in a worldwide battle against the cabal of international bankers, such as the Rothschilds, international globalists, such as George Soros, globalist corporatists, or pirates, as I like to call them, and also politicians like our traitorous, unelected soy boy of a Taoiseach. The battle is not only being waged all across the EU, it's being waged in America, it's even being waged in Brazil. National populism is rising everywhere you look. And here's the good news. We're winning. The problem is, you haven't been told that. That news is being censored from you. And that brings us to the second roadblock, the Irish media. RTE and the Irish print media, almost all of which is owned by one man, Chuck Feeney, has only one agenda, and that is to censor what you are allowed to know, allowed to think, and allowed to say. Some of our best writers and thinkers have been blacklisted from their trade simply because their thoughts don't conform to the current anti-Irish socialist dogma. These are not news outlets. They are government propagandists, no different from Pravda in its heyday or Joseph Goebbels during the Third Reich. These government-sponsored media outlets' job is not to keep you informed. Their job is to censor what you are allowed to know. They attempt to stamp out any opinions that are not approved by their corporate masters. Seem to be having their problems. Recently, though, something interesting happened. And because I'm a former politician and have run a couple of successful political campaigns in America, I noticed something. It was in the media treatment of Peter Casey in the recent presidential elections. Now, I am not here to endorse Mr. Casey or give credence to his position on travelers. But I think his election campaign revealed a chink in the armor of the establishment, and I believe showed us the key to winning in the May elections. I contend that his popularity skyrocketed from a minimal 3% that he was polling to as much as 30% in some areas, particularly in Kerry, that unforeseen by the polling in a matter of only 2 weeks. Now, unfortunately, it was the last 2 weeks. But having said that, I think what it was about was not about the traveler issue, although there may be some validity to that, but that he essentially told the Irish media to get stuffed. They tried to call him a racist, they tried to call him all their normal names, and it had no effect. By refusing to back down from these media bullies, he struck a chord with the Irish voters who've been waiting for someone to stand up to them. What if a candidate, or even a bunch of candidates, or better yet, a political party, were to start the same idea, only to start that attitude from day one? What if, when the media called them racist, etc., instead of rolling over and trying to meekly deny the accusations, as most politicians do, they said, no, it is not us. It is you, the media, that are the racists. You are racists against the native Irish people. You are traitors to our nation, to our customs, and to our traditions. You have betrayed your own countrymen. You have sold us out, and our children, and our grandchildren, to a bunch of ridiculous bureaucrats. It's time that you, the media, are held accountable. A damn good start, and Ben already mentioned it, would be demanding putting an end to that god-awful TV license tax. Let's see how they'll pay those ridiculous salaries without it. All of which brings me to the third roadblock. Politically correct cowardice. Way too many good, strong, decent Irish men and women have been cowed from standing up for their rights and their children and their grandchildren's future by mere words. Think of that. They have stolen our birthright from us. These bastards walked right in our front door and took from us the precious inheritance that our forefathers fought so long and hard to leave you. Did they have a gun? No. Did they have ball bats or machetes? No. All they had were words. We were terrified of being called a racist, or a sexist, or a homophobe, or an Islamophobe, or whatever else these pathetic far-left radicals have in their lexicon. It was all they needed. We are good, decent, hard-working people, and we try to treat all people fairly. Being accused of being a hateful bigot is deeply offensive, and we naturally recoil from that accusation, even though we have done nothing to deserve it. The truth is that these tactics are only effective because we allow them to be. Coming from America and being a political conservative myself, I've become all too familiar with these tactics. I've been called virtually all of those names. Hillary herself went to the full Monty. She lumped all of us together when she referred to half of the American populace as racist, sexist, homophobic, Islamophobic, as she said, you know, a whole basket of deplorables. It was so over the top that we seized on it and we wore it as a badge of honor. I love being referred to as a deplorable. And you know what? Not only did it cost her the election, but once we made that decision, we became bulletproof. Suddenly they no longer had the power over us, and the childhood retort became a political manifesto. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. These terms no longer have any effect. Now people have told me that they're afraid of losing friends and family and even their jobs. And these are indeed potential consequences of that action. But when you think of what our fathers went through, the hell to give us the invaluable gift of freedom, then these traitorous bastards that make up the Irish Troika, Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, Sinn Féin, the whole lot of them, gave it away to corrupt international bankers, to greedy bureaucrats, to the Merkels, to the Macrons. And what did we receive in exchange? The honor of bailing out their failed banking system and real estate schemes and absorbing all their debt in the form of an IOU that our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren will be saddled with. It is time to say enough, to once again be in control of our destiny. So what do we do? What concrete steps can we take when we leave here tonight? Let's start with the most important thing. If you knew that someone was trying to eliminate you by putting a little poison in your coffee every morning, what would be the first smart thing to do? Well, for me, it's stop drinking the coffee. Well, we're in a similar situation. They are trying to poison our minds with BS lies and propaganda every day. RTE, the print media, are filling our minds with the narrative their corporate masters want to feed us. Now let me tell you, Kerry already has more than enough sheep. We don't need to add to it. You avoid that by beginning to think for yourselves, to do your own research. Turn off the damn TV. Turn on your computer. Turn on your smartphones. Go to YouTube. There are thousands of channels out there of people telling you the truth of what's actually going on, telling you the stuff that RTE will never tell you, telling you the stuff that you'll never read in a newspaper. And many of them are Irish citizen journalists. Whoops. You start to check out the YouTube for similar sites. There are numerous sources of factual information on there. Citizen journalists like Rowan Croft, Gemma O'Doherty, Dr. Steve Turley, these are all names you'll find there simply enough, that are actually telling the truth. People who are on the ground in places like Ruski and Roscommon bringing the actual news that RTE is refusing to show you or only reporting one side of it. Begin to think for yourselves. Start to discover the truth of what is happening all around you, around your nation, around the EU, hell, all around the world. And then take the next important step. Share it. Share it with some family. Share it with some friends. Share it with friends in the pub. You don't need to be a radical or start a fight or anything like that. Just send them a link send them a link to the video with a message like, have you seen this? Did you know about this? What do you think of this? You don't have to convert anyone. Just open the door a crack and let the light of the truth start to come in. The rest will take care of itself. Now I want to leave you tonight with a word. It's a magical word. It's an incredibly powerful word. It's overthrown dictators and brought down nations. Martin Luther King knew it. Gandhi knew it. And the people all over Ireland are learning it. The word is no. No! Did you see the Irish mammy in Ruski, who was confronting the people without prophets and all that?
Yes.
She was standing up to them all by herself, and she was saying, no, not here, no. Now, and the cattle truck that showed up in Roscommon in the middle of the night, they were not just saying no, but oh hell no. Now I do not condone violence as an answer, but it was the mercenaries hired by foreign banks that set the rules of that engagement. I suspect that they would be the loudest voices opposed to any such further violence. Now, when one person says the word, it's just an oddity. Maybe the media will send out a camera to cover you or something. When 10 people say it, then the left start to show up and call you names and hold a little demonstration for you. Now, when 100 people show up, all saying no, they may send the guard out to make sure that nothing happens here. But think of it. Then when 1,000 show up, and all of a sudden those jackanapes in the Dale begin to think twice. Suddenly someone calls for further study of the issue, or tabling that motion. And when tens of thousands show up at the polls and say no, then you'll watch the arc of history bend in an entirely new direction. Will this Irexit movement for Irish freedom end here tonight? Will you Irish men and women continue to tolerate the betrayals in Leinster House and Brussels? Will we continue to let a group of unelected drunkards in Brussels continue to steal our money and dictate our immigration policies, our fishing rights, our military neutrality, and tell us how to raise our children? The question brings us back to where we began. Will we allow evil to triumph while we stand by and do nothing? Or will we say no? This is a question each of you has to answer. I cannot speak for you, but as for me, the answer is not just no, but hell no. Aaron Gabrat.